Hey YouTube, welcome back to the RPG Daily. I'm your host, Richard Quiner, and this is the Game Master's Craft, and this, I believe, is episode 20. That's 20 days of chatting with some of the most brilliant minds in tabletop role-playing, and today is no exception. I just found out about this gentleman last week. His name is John Bultena. He is a writing professor at UC Merced, Dungeons & Dragons writer and creator, and just all-around an interesting fella to talk to. So we're going to get into that right about now. John, welcome to the show. Let me unmute you. There you go. Thank you for taking this afternoon to sit down and talk. It's always the hottest time of day here in California when I do this stream, so we got lucky that it's cooled down a little bit. But I appreciate you taking the time. Why don't we start off, just tell the folks who you are and what you do.
All right, man. I'm John Bultena. I am currently a professor of writing at the University of California, Merced. There, I principally actually teach writing for engineering, so like technical writing. But the thing that's kind of been interesting lately is I've been teaching a class about Dungeons & Dragons, role-playing games in general, called Dungeons & Dragons Skills IRL ? It's called that because you only have so many characters. And I had to do the IRL as kind of a way to talk about the way we're leveraging these elements of role-playing games and D&D into kind of real-world research. It's part of a series of classes we have at the campus called Spark, which is a freshman class. But I've been playing D&D for a while, and I play a lot, and I really enjoy it. It means a lot to me. I also have a very small company called Cauldron Tower, where we produce D&D adventures, supplements, and clothing. But we're kind of on hiatus due to the pandemic. We're trying to take it one day at a time, make sure that I got other things. I got students and stuff like that. There are responsibilities. So I'm trying to make sure that that's my priorities are straight and the like. But yeah, man, it's good to be here. I've actually been watching the show now for about 2-3 weeks and been enjoying it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you had one of my Friday night players on here last week, Brianna.
Oh yeah, Brianna Flame.
Yeah.
Yes.
She was on our Friday night online game.
All
great.
Right. She had some really interesting thoughts that I had. Every time I have a guest on, there's something they say that I'm like, I'd never thought of that. So while I am making a show for my viewers, I'm also using this to improve my own skills, and I've learned quite a bit. It's been really enjoyable. But your laundry list of projects and things you have going on, we're going to get into those here in a little bit. Especially want to talk to you about your Dungeons & Dragons class. But first, how did you get into Dungeons & Dragons to begin with?
Okay, so that starts about 1988. I wasn't started, so I was only like 7 or 8 when I kind of first heard of it.
Okay.
We had a local hobby store called Hobby Castle, and it's called Hobby Castle because actually not too far from where I live, we used to be an old Air Force base called Castle Air Force Base, and so Hobby Castle was owned by one of the old retired guys, and it had RC cars, yarn, miniature war games, paints, lots of models. They had tons and tons of stuff hanging from the ceiling. Mm-hmm. But they also had D&D stuff. And so I saw the miniatures, and I asked my mom if I could buy some miniatures and to paint them. And I was, a little kid, and she said sure. So I got some miniatures and I kind of painted them. And I was painting the miniatures originally because I was playing a board game called Dungeon, which if you haven't played Dungeon, it came out by TSR originally before Dungeons & Dragons, and it's kind of a basic board game. Wizards put out a re-release of it. But I played that with my mom's best friend's husband, who was as it turned out, was a big D&D player back in the 70s. And so I was playing that a bit, and then went on to play something like Heroes Quest and everything like that. And then my buddy picked up D&D when I was about 9 years old, and we played that a little bit and had some fun with it. It was a little, it was a little over our heads, but we kind of hung with it. I started playing the video games, everything like that. I played Eye of the Beholder. That blew my mind. And from there, kind of picked up over the years. So about the time I was like 12, 13 in 8th grade, I had a group together that my homeroom teacher helped me put together. It was with a lot of the kids in the gifted classes. They had a group, and so he put me with their group, and we kind of hung out and played from there. And then high school, I played with a bunch of friends and just been playing since. So that's actually now been about 30 years. So
Holy cow.
Yeah.
And so it sounds also like schooling has had quite an impact on keeping you in the game. Like your homeroom teacher helps you put together a group.
Yeah.
In that 30 years, what about the game kept you coming back?
Originally it was just kind of a way for me to get friends. I was still pretty kind of like coming out of some issues I was having, as a youth. I had some undiagnosed learning disabilities, and so that really I had a lot of problems with behavior and such because of that early on. And then that kind of helped me get some kind of like, I don't know, say baseline friends, initial friends, and we came together over that and started playing and hanging out. And then in high school, I had some friends that wanted to play, so I was like, let's go play, and we hung out and played a bit. And then I didn't really like have a really like genuinely consistent, solid group playing until I was probably like 25, 26. We really cranked into it, and then since then we've been playing pretty consistently. So
Okay, so
but I
that
don't know what keeps me coming back, and I just like I mean, different times, different things. It depends. What my interest is always changing and shifting, and right now I just like the community of it in terms of my friends. I like trying to impress them. I like trying to wow them. It keeps me on my toes, keeps me trying to like step it up every time, and
yeah.
it's getting harder and harder, but I like it. So
Yeah, the current climate of the game, it's
it's way
harder
different.
to run games and have them be, there's a bar that's been set, and we can all say, oh, you don't have to reach that bar, but deep down, I think all of us kind of feel like, oh, we want to give that crazy D&D experience to our players. I know I feel that way all the time,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
half the fun.
I'll when you ask me for my number one DM tip, I'll share what I have to say about that actually.
Well, let's just do that now, actually.
Do that now?
Yeah, let's just do that
Oh, yeah.
now.
So I think your question is like, what's the one thing you would tell new
New
DMs?
DMs, yeah.
And it's funny because it's actually my same advice I give to people that are trying to like my same dating advice actually.
Okay.
As yeah, I bet you guys weren't expecting that, but it's kind of the advice I kind of did when I was dating was I don't have expectations.
Hmm.
And so let me rephrase that. So when I would go on a date, I'd be like, all right, what am I doing? Well, we're gonna go and like we're gonna go get coffee and walk around, talk, and maybe dinner or something like that. Okay, that's all I expect. That's all it's on the itinerary. And maybe I'm expecting to have a nice conversation and have some good coffee and just hang out with somebody. And that's all I want. Anything else is like superfluous to that.
Right.
So if we have a second date, that's superfluous. If we, if we even hug at the end of the night or are even friendly at the end of the night, that's superfluous. Same thing with D&D. All I know is that we're going to show up, we're going to sit down, we're going to hang out, drink some coffee, eat some pizza. That's all I know we're going to do. But anything beyond that, having fun, is all like the whipped cream, the cherry on top. So like I want to try to not to go in there with like I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. It's gonna be this, it's gonna be that. Don't do that. Just go in and be like, all right, my only goal is to have a nice time. That's it.
That is a really good tip.
Thank you.
That is very good. And that's smart too. Once you have expectations, you set yourself up for not reaching those expectations, which leads to disappointment. That's right. That's brilliant.
If you ever played 40K, it was one of the common like kind of phrases is hope is the first step on the road to disappointment.
Yeah.
and it's true, man. So just but like it's but my friends all know they're like, we're gonna have a good time. That's cool. That's what we're gonna do. But they don't know what's good. I don't say this has to happen. I have to have this to have fun. I have to do this. My friends don't think I have to kill 30 goblins to have a good time. They just know that like something's gonna be fun and they're gonna have a good time there or not. So
yeah. Wow, that is really good advice. So I'll have to, at the end of the show, we'll just re-reference this so people know that this is here, because that's really clever. Shifting gears, because the thing that fascinated me was this Dungeons and Dragons class at a university level, and you just gave like a brief synopsis. Could you repeat like the idea behind the class a little bit?
Sure. So the class is a general education course for freshmen. Incoming freshmen have to take it. We've only had this course. It's called Spark 1 in the catalog now this is actually the second year we've had it. And essentially what the class is about is the students come in and we have a general topic. So this semester, my class is D&D. I have a friend that did one on skateboarding culture. There's one about like physics and sports. There's one about like politics. I mean, there's all kinds of different topics of these things going on. But the general idea is that the students come in, they have access to somebody who's like an expert on the field, on the topic, whatever it may be. And then the goal of the class is for them to create what's called a line of inquiry paper, which is not a research project. It's a question for a research project. So the question was, let's expose them. So the idea is expose them a lot to this topic, and then let them use their own expertise, their own fields of study, whatever it is, to then try to look at the types of things that would go on with that. They could research with that topic.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
So a lot of my class, actually, a lot of them have been really interested. Originally, there was only a few, but now they're very interested. Is the psychological effects and like kind of therapeutic elements of role playing games. So our class had to go online mid-semester, right before spring break, or right in spring break, excuse me. And we had basically every Wednesday we were playing D&D and in the class. And so a lot of the students kind of came dependent upon that, and they were really worried about not being able to play, not being able to hang out with their friends in the class or have that kind of commonality. And so I was able to set up through the UC was gracious enough to give us all like really nice Zoom accounts. And I can now host all my students in there and put them in a breakout rooms on Wednesdays, and they can play. And then now part of their final end of the class was like they had to figure out how to play beyond in the summer if they want to continue. But I'm going to still play with a student. I'm just playing one of their groups. Actually, it's funny. The DM in that group is only 16. Like he's super young. He's actually in school way early. Yeah, and he's running Storm King's Thunder for his first run. And I was like, all right, man, I'm into it. But he's been good. He's probably been cool, man. He's been a lot of fun. I get to play my druid, and it's a lot of good time. So, but the students are doing really well on it. And but they all saw that psychological element of that it had. That companionship, that friendliness, they've become, I don't want to say dependent upon it, but they've seen the value of it. And it was funny because we had back in February, I was able to bring in Satine Phoenix to come speak to the students. We did a big public thing, and she also came to my class. And she talked a lot about kind of how role-playing games has helped her through her issues. And she's currently writing kind of a book anthology about this type of stuff. And so it was funny because like they were oh, I understand, I see what that's saying, but now they're like, oh shit, that's real. Like that's how it's actually doing it for me now. Is like I'm looking forward to my game every Wednesday with my friends because it gives me something to kind of do and not just feel so isolated.
Holy cow, that's a lot of looking at it. And how was the course structured from the instructing side of it? What did you kind of do?
So the first half of the class, about the first third of the class, was us kind of looking at what these things are. So that's a big question. So one of the things actually, so the book, we read 2 books. We read the Player's Handbook, 5th edition, and I read this book, which is by Joseph Laycock, Dangerous Games. I will preach this book for a very long time. And it's put out by the University of California Press. And his book he's a religious studies professor out of Texas. And he he talks about kind of the moral panic around it, but he gives a really good history about role-playing games. And it's very, very, very well researched. And so we kind of read that as kind of a way to look at somebody who's actually researched role-playing games. But one of the things he says in that book is that there is kind of no true anthropology of role-playing games, in that everybody that's ever like researched them has played them. So nobody's like sitting outside like and watching like the villagers from afar. They've actually been in the village.
Yeah.
And so he's like, so I was like, initially I was like, screw it. People were kind of, I'm not really sure what this is. And I could have had them go watch Critical Role or something like that, which is fine. But I was like, why don't we just sit down and play? Why don't I just grab like 5 of you here, and I'll come with the game off the top of my head, and we just play with some pre-made characters and have some fun. And everyone kind of saw what it was about. And then so a few weeks later, they let them put into groups, and then they started playing their own game. And some people volunteered to be DMs, and they just kind of hung out and played. And so that was half of the class. The other half of the class was reading the book and looking at how he researched it, which then we went into how do you research your own topic? Can I answer questions about that research topic? What kind of resources do we have to research these topics? And my background I have a master's in library information sciences, in addition to my other graduate degrees, and so I know how to research things and look and find topics and information in very very unique ways, we'll say. And so yeah, we did that, and that's actually what they're turning in tonight, is their line of inquiry paper, where they're kind of showing me their research question and how they came to that research question, and then where they think they would go with that research question, along with the sources they use to influence themselves. So.
Wow. So you not only introduced a whole group of kids to this game, but you also got them thinking about it in a critical, like what this can do for other parts of society, I guess we could say.
The topics besides like psychology, which is a big one, but also looking into one of the more fascinating questions I heard asked a while back was, in computer science, the pinnacle of like computer science for a very long time, I remember this especially in the 90s, was can we get a computer to play chess and like beat Kasparov or whoever, these champions? And we did that. But someone asked this question a few years back, was like, well, what if instead of like trying to teach computers to play chess, we taught them to try to play role-playing games instead initially? How much different would our kind of approaches to AI and programming be? And it was a really interesting topic to think about. So we talked about that a little bit. I got some students that are looking at kind of like using it as an instructional method of role playing, stuff like that. So there's a lot of different topics. I'm sure I'll see plenty at night when they turn their papers in. I got 24 of them. So
wow.
There's 24 students in the class, so supposedly there's gonna be 24 of them. We'll see if they all turn it in. But
right, holy cow, that's where you get these like really interesting. We always think about D&D and role-playing games for the kind of therapeutic, psychological side of it. But that's really interesting that now these kids are thinking of the other parts where this same concept can come into play. That's wild.
That's what role-playing games began as, simulation.
Yeah.
And that's a big element of computer science, is building up simulations. We have a big chemistry simulator group at the campus, and they're running computational chemistry, and so that's a simulation, and that's what D&D is trying to do, is it creates a system to like operate these simulations in. But I'm also cool because I like this book because it really shows how I swear I'm not getting paid for this, but it's no, I get a nickel every time I show it on camera. No, I really like how it shows the anatomy of a moral panic.
Yeah. So let's get into that a little bit, because you mentioned that you reached out to Dan after the stream yesterday and talked some more about that. I'm honestly not super familiar. I know the panic existed, and like my life growing up, we weren't really allowed to play D&D, but it wasn't the same time as the whole panic was happening, so I think it was more of the aftershock, I guess. Yeah. What is it like, the idea behind the panic, and how did that all get started according to your book, which is interesting?
It starts in a few elements, and there's moral panics always have some common elements. One of the major elements is that you have a targeted population that you believe is vulnerable, that is vulnerable, but is the one being attacked. And so in this case, the moral panic was largely for these younger people, so young kids. So you're talking like teenagers to like early college students. So people that don't have a lot of money. A lot of them can't even vote. They don't have property. They can be affected upon. The other idea with that too is that you have these kids, and they're inside of the U.S. They're in here, so the threat's actually coming from the inside. It's kind of homebrew. And so it really kicks off with, I always forget the guy's name, but the big case, and there is I'm not sure if you know this, but Tom Hanks got his start in that movie Monsters and Mazes.
Yeah, I've heard about it.
Off this initial story, I always forget the guy's name. And basically what it is that this kid was in college, and he went missing, and his family kind of went and wanted to find him. They couldn't find him. They knew he had been associated with this gaming club on campus. They found some D&D books in his room, and they became convinced that this is what caused him to go AWOL. And like supposedly he had gone down in the steam tunnels to make a real dungeon and all this kind of stuff like that. And they hired this private investigator. The private investigator had like voiced himself up. He told this story, and he wrote a book after this. And he told a story how before all this happened, he had like rescued some girl from like a cult, and like escaped by helicopter while holding the girl, and like putting her in the chopper and shooting these people while he's leaving. I mean, it's a crazy story. And everyone's kind of, the reaction of the book is like, why didn't you write that book instead of about a book about trying to find a kid who was playing D&D and went AWOL? But what it turned out was that This kid had had numerous problems with drugs. He had problems with mental health, stuff that basically his parents kind of brushed off and ignored.
Mm-hmm.
They chose to scapegoat it, and he would actually. It was actually interesting because he was actually ejected from the gaming club on campus because he showed up to games high and he would do drugs during the game. But no, it couldn't have been that.
No.
And they end up finding him basically living with some people far off, and and everything. But it's this kind of idea that they blamed something and they wanted to blame this game. And what gets kind of crazy about it is that they leverage this into money making. And so the moral panic didn't really come about because of this incident. It came about because they leveraged this incident into a profit making machine where the guy they hired and the family were effectively having law enforcement, FBI, sheriff's departments pay them to train them on the threat of these games.
Wow.
And the book goes really into depth and looks at all this stuff like that.
Wow. That's something I never even heard before.
And so for me, when I read this book, it really helped me a lot. So I grew up in a home that was religious. I was raised Lutheran, and my dad was elder of the church. And I had some trouble with my mental health due to my undiagnosed learning disabilities and being kind of reacclimated and stuff like that, and being basically mismedicated for several years.
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever I got in trouble, or I got in trouble a few times in high school in middle school and high school, and my dad's reaction was to burn my books. Like, he flat out went to burn. He was going to burn my books. It didn't happen. My mom stopped him, but that was his scapegoat. It couldn't have been that I was depressed. It couldn't have been that I was misdiagnosed. It couldn't have been that stuff at school is hard, or getting bullied. It had to be that. And so it reminds me a lot of this is a horrible punishment, a bad punishment. In that, I'm reminded that there was that thing about am I an asshole thing about the person who erased their kid's Minecraft game on Twitter recently. Their kid, a year and a half of Minecraft, and it was like you took away the one thing they enjoyed.
Yeah.
You took that away from them. So it really helped me understand, because my dad was both my parents were involved in law enforcement, and so I understood why this book helped me understand why he was so pressured on that.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. That sets a stage that. So for the viewers, this is a very different conversation than I normally have, but I think this is interesting. It's interesting to me, and I think it's really interesting to know where the stuff this game has gone through and the history here. So I'm just gonna keep digging.
That's fine.
So that idea of using something as a scapegoat is kind of a common thing. It happens. It comes back time and again.
Yeah.
Does the book, or do you have any thoughts on why people in those positions tend to grasp at something that is seemingly innocent when they're blinded to the actual problems that may actually exist?
So yeah, that's one of Laycock's major arguments on that, is that fundamentally religious belief needs imagination. You can't most religions were I'm not actually seeing God or talking to God, but it's God somehow out there, or the spirituality out there, and you have to use imagination to think about that. And so the question was why is this imagination so scary? And Gygax was a missionary. Gygax was a devout Jehovah's Witness. He had his first publications were in religious books or journals and everything like that. And it was actually funny because some of my students, I know at least 3 of them they told their parents about taking this class. And their parents were like, you will not take that class. You will not. But they took it anyways because they're adults.
Yeah.
And one of the students who actually is Jehovah's Witness was like, look, this guy that found the game is actually Jehovah's Witness. Look at this stuff he wrote and his belief. And Gygax is the guy that put the cleric, he put the paladin, he put holy characters as the heroes, which was not very heard of at the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's no cleric in Lord of the Rings.
No.
So where does that come from? And it's kind of him putting those into it. So it's really interesting. But yeah, we still struggle with that moral panic. It still lingers here and there.
Yeah,
I think it's a lot better. It's a lot better than it was when I was a kid. I don't feel like I have to cover it up as much or something like that.
I think a lot of the times when we do see the moral panic, I think people at least, I mean, I grew up in a similar situation, a religious family. Any sort of sense of depression or anxiety or mental struggle was kind of just ignored for the sake of, keeping up appearances a little bit, without getting into a lot of details. But then, we grow up and then we start to see things and we're like,
Mhm.
oh, yeah. And we kind of understand from that other side of it where it's like, oh, this was a real struggle for us at this
Mhm.
time. Um, so now whenever a governor or a senator comes out and says, like, oh, video games make us violent and
Yeah.
try to create these moral panics, a large part of the adult population now is like, well, no, that's incorrect
Yeah.
because we've been around it long enough. We know, but it's still kind of crazy to me, and it's interesting that it still comes up time and again. There's always that, like,
Yeah, the book is interesting too because it doesn't just talk about Dungeons and Dragons. It talks about Vampire the Masquerade, and Vampire was a whole nother moral panic because Vampire's threat was that it's parallel to our world. It wasn't a
oh,
fantasy world; it's an enhanced version of our world.
mhm,
And the thing was that like White Wolf didn't exactly hold that back. And
right.
so the big thing to point to in that was I don't know if you're how familiar with Vampire, but the Book of Nod. Um,
Very unfamiliar.
they put out a thing called the Book of Nod, which is basically the account of Cain in the Bible, who's the first vampire, and it's written like the Bible. It's chaptered and verses, and
Okay.
it's about Lilith and Cain.
Hmm.
And in it, Cain's whole premise is that, um, we all know the story of Cain and Abel, and in this version is that God says, "Hey, Cain and Abel, I want you to sacrifice something that like genuinely means something to you to my name." So Abel steps up and sacrifices his best animals. And then Cain's like, well, what means the most to me? Oh, my brother. So I'll sacrifice my brother. And so he sacrifices a brother. And God's like, yeah, that's not what I meant, dude. Like, get out.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of this kind of like it's this weird kind of retelling, sympathetic telling of it, and how like Cain is cast out into Nod and has to kind of wander the earth until he finds Lilith, who's Adam's first husband, and then goes about it and such like that. So it's really, but it is written and set up, and it looks like a Bible, and
Wow.
it's meant to be a prop as like for vampire LARPing. Yeah, so it's stuff like that. It's kind of interesting about vampire and how it kind of like parallels it. So there's kind of different stages of the moral panic.
Hmm.
But it did die out quite a bit in the 90s because there's always a different moral panic. I think the next moral panic then, like in the 90s, was for me was like gangster rap was a huge moral panic.
Hmm.
Once again, it's a threat from inside the country, where it's just kids listening to it. Then I think it changes up post 9/11 to a different type of threat. There's like homebrewed terrorists or people in here do those kind of stuff like that. So there's always some sort of moral panic we're looking at.
Yeah.
And it just kind of shifts attention. But yeah, the role playing game one does come up still. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so interesting, and it's interesting that your students kind of went through that same thing now, even
Yeah,
though
yeah,
it's
yeah. And none of them were like. It was never like how dare you like that. But it was
right.
shocking to their parents still, and I get that. But a lot of my students are also first generation students, so their parents also probably can't understand like, well, how are you going to go learn about Dungeons and Dragons at a university that costs $15,000 a year? How dare you? Something like this. I get that too.
Hmm.
But still, yeah, it's still really interesting. Yeah.
That wow. Okay. I got a question from the audience I want to read before we move on real quick.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, that's a question for later. Actually,
Okay.
I was just making sure it wasn't on this topic because I do want to shift gears a little bit because you are published on the DMs Guild now, which I know I have one adventure on there, and I think you have like 4 or 5.
I have 2 adventures and I have a few little supplements.
Okay, it's a lot of work,
It is.
so I commend your effort getting that out there because that's so much work to do. When you came up with these, can you just give me like a brief synopsis of your adventures?
Yeah, so there's 2 of them, which is Children of the Hills and then Wolf Lord Yule. Wolf Lord Yule is the one that I kind of like spearheaded. And Wolf Lord Yule is a sandbox adventure. So I modeled it a lot off of like Curse of Strahd, in that it is about a valley where you kind of come into this kind of mysterious, and it's there's a bandit issue, and then it kind of deals with this idea that someone else is trying to solve the issue, but they've basically taken a bazooka to a fly.
Okay.
And you're kind of having to rein. They unleashed a weapon on the valley that like isn't really meant for this kind of issue.
Oh, okay.
And so the players have to kind of race to do it. And I built it in a way that it's sandboxy. There's consequences. So like if the players don't act in time, stuff starts to happen. But it's very well fleshed out, and it's actually not a bad little setting. I've actually had Lily Sparks, who runs. She was actually doing it as a stream. She was actually running that adventure as a stream.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know how many episodes they got into. I don't know if they finished. I don't think they finished it, but yeah, it was really cool to watch someone play my adventure out and everything. But I ran it for my students for the club at the UC. But I'm very proud of that one. It's about it took me about to run it for the students at the UC. It took us about 10 sessions of about 4 hours each.
Oh.
To run. It's pretty big, yeah, and it can take a while to run, or it can be very short. It depends on how the players handle it too. But it's very lethal. And it comes with all maps. We have battle maps. We have a map of the valley. We have there's an original song in there by one of my friends, Kaylee, who has a band called Morcerta. I'm really into dungeon synth, as I got my Mortis patch on, and I like that kind of music a lot, and I listen to a lot of it. Just kind of influenced me and everything like that too. So it was kind of a cool multimedia project. And then we made a shirt for it as well with the cover art by David Paul Seymour, who does a lot of artwork for bands and everything too, like that. So yeah.
Very cool. And then your other one, what was your other one about?
That was called Children of the Hills, and my partner at the time, Amanda, had my company partner Amanda had initially pitched that one. That was our no budget adventure. We had no budget.
Oh, okay.
We had no money on it, and the idea is, can we do it in 2 months and put it out? And that's why it's 50 cents on there. But it's a short little adventure, and the premise is like there's a town that's basically having a string of robberies and stolen stuff like that, and people have reported these like weird shadowy children coming out and like doing things, and so the players are there to kind of help out and figure out what's going on.
Okay, that seems to be pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward. Yeah, it was a simple. It's simpler, but it's kind of creepy. All of them are definitely kind of more horror oriented. Wolf Lord Yol has it's lethal. If the players aren't smart, they will die. I'm it's very open about that, and we give them ample opportunity to run away. But if they're not the kind that run away, they're gonna die.
Okay.
So it's fun enough. Yeah.
Well, I commend you on getting those published, because it's no small feat to get things posted up there.
Yeah, the other stuff I have on there is like a supplement. I have a big thing about rewriting rules, or not rewriting rules, but whenever we house rules, something like that, my approach is not to change the rules, but to add to the rules. Okay. So I have like a 2-weapon fighting addendum, which basically adds 2 sentences into the player's handbook, and it makes 2-weapon fighting actually like really much better. I've been commended a lot by my house rules actually, because I've been thinking about them for a lot. We play with them quite a bit, so yeah.
Okay. Talking about creating these kind of adventures, let's start off with, where do you just draw your inspiration for the things you create?
So my home game is actually much more interesting than any of that, to be honest. It's like, and we've been running that game now this is our second campaign in that world. It's a sequel to the previous one, 20 years later with new characters. And we've been playing that now for about 5 years.
Wow.
And each session's we play about once every other weekend, and each session's about 6 to 8 hours. So we're playing pretty intense. Right now, the current party is 14th level, and we started first with this one. So, and we're nowhere near the end. And so, but I draw a lot of influence on this initial one. When I first started that campaign, I drew a lot of my influence from Estonian folklore.
Okay.
Estonian folklore is very different than most European folklore, and I found it really intriguing. And the idea of their ideas on giants and their ideas on like river spirits and everything like that was really interesting. So I kind of basically built my adventure out of that. And then what I usually do, and I think Masucci talked about this a little bit yesterday too, was the idea was I started with basically a town and a festival in a valley, and basically was a land graph, we call it. So we use like kind of German terminology for it, a land graph or graph, we would call it. And that's all it started. So when the players came, I asked them, where are you from? And they said, where can I be from? I was like, no, where are you from? Like, what's the place like? And we went from there. So one of them was like, well, I want to be from a elven society that's kind of based on Japanese, medieval Japanese society. And I was like, okay, that now exists. What's the name of it? And so we go from there and we build out, and now that's actually like a pretty well fleshed out area, and the whole nation's actually fleshed out. So I start with the map, and I start just mapping it out and building out from a small part out. I did have an end game in thought, and a lot of my time, my influence comes from like I ask myself weird questions.
Okay.
So the last campaign started off with what would a war between a beholder and a devil look like? And so that was kind of the premise of it. And so I built out of that. And the question was like, what would they fight about?
Yeah.
And so we built it out of that. And then the players, a lot of my influence comes from my players' actions and like how they usurp the situation and such like that. But yeah, a lot of folklore. I pull a lot off music I listen to, a lot of art. I collect a decent amount of art. This is actually just like my posters. I don't like my wife and I's painting collections in the other room where my D&D stuff is.
Okay. So you have art, you have your music. Do you use music in your games?
Oh yeah, I have like I don't even know how long it is. It's like about 120-hour long Dungeon Synth playlist.
Holy cow.
So yeah, I love that stuff. Yeah.
Some of my players have gotten into Dungeon Synth lately, and they've been like sending me playlists on Spotify and stuff. They're like, keep this. So I have one game that we use that.
the best place to find it is Bandcamp. Bandcamp's it, man. That's the best place to get music. So I pick up lots of stuff on there. Right now I'm listening. I have a big vinyl record collection, and so I have some of it on vinyl. So I actually just got the Thanagora Drim records on vinyl. That was pretty cool to listen to it on vinyl. So I dig that. But most of my Dungeon Synth is electronic. So
yeah,
because it's lo-fi, it's easier. It's actually funny. It's easier to get it on cassette than it is on records. So
interesting. For 2020, you buy things on cassette still. Okay.
They like the lo-fi kind of scratchiness to the.
That makes sense.
Because that's the premise of Dungeon Synth, is that it's lo-fi, very simple music with kind of extreme composition.
Yeah. Okay, so this is more of a technical question, but when you're actually running your games and using your music, what tools do you use to keep that going without distracting yourself too much or slowing down the game?
Well, I just have it on a random playlist.
Oh.
I have it on my laptop, and then I run it through a Bluetooth speaker that's actually on top of my bookshelf in the room.
Okay, so you don't use any fancy tools to like change the mood at just the right time.
No, I just kind of keep it on, and I have my, if I need to skip the track or the track's not too appropriate, I can just Alt Tab over and hit B, and it goes to the next track. So.
Oh, okay, that's very straightforward. That's kind of my method too. Is just keep it simple, throw some music out there.
The more moving, I teach engineering, writing, and a simple lesson in engineering. The more parts you have, the more likely something is to break. So keep it simple.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. I learned that from this stream. Every time I tried to make something more cool, it breaks, and I have problems. Real quick, before we dive into the audience question, because this one, he wrote like a paragraph.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, yeah.
But I wanted to just go back real quick. Your number one tip for new dungeon masters was to, again, can you repeat it or summarize it, I guess?
Yeah, so the idea is that, once again, it's my dating advice, is go in with no expectations or simple expectations. And I'm not saying lower your expectations, I'm saying simple expectations. So like that you're going to hang out with your friends, you're going to have a nice time, you're going to drink some coffee, you're going to eat some pizza, you're going to laugh a little bit or something like that. Just go with simple expectations of the game. Don't say I need to have this happen, I need to have that happen, this has to be like this. Just let it kind of happen, flow it out.
Yeah.
And it'll kind of like simmer its way down into something nice. And that way you're not disappointed, they're not disappointed, because people, that expectation can really like it can be a menace. Yeah. It can hurt. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And that is a really good dating advice. I used that when I started dating and found my fiance.
Aww.
No expectations, and here we are 4 years later.
There it goes.
So that it works. It works.
Yeah.
So let's get into this question. This is from Jack Grimble. He's been coming by a lot, asking some questions.
Yeah, I've seen him on here,
yeah. Yeah. So his question is, do you ever explain to players how they feel about something or what they like? As in, if they taste something or meet someone, do you tell them what they feel or let them explain it?
At times, yes. So if I've had these characters in the party and I've known them for a while, and you might have them eat something or drink something and be like, this is impressive. The complexity of this flavor is really impressive. I'm not saying they like it necessarily, but I'm saying it's complex. And my nephew calls it the DTF, which stands for the Dwarven Task Force. And so there's 3 dwarves in the party, and he's like, all right, Dwarven Task Force, DTF to the rescue. Obviously, that stands for something more common nomenclature. That stands for. But the characters are obsessed, or the party is obsessed with like alcohol taste, and so they want to hear about the complexities of stuff like that, and can they figure out where it's from or something like that. And so sometimes also emotion I might play into it. There is times where you get feelings or things do come over, but I typically don't have that just be like you feel this way. There's a reason why that's triggering in you. So one of the characters, for example, has a cold iron eye, like the one the dwarf actually has his eye replaces the cold iron eye, and I might say your cold iron eye is starting to tingle a bit and giving you a sense of like uneasiness or something like that.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's necessarily me telling them how they feel. I think it's me telling them like here's a potentially passing emotion. Do you run with it or do you not?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've seen quite a few DMs who do that though, who say, oh, you feel uneasy or you feel scared. I mean, fear as a mechanic, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, a lot of that comes from my. It's no secret. I'm a big fan of Michael Moorcock and the Elric saga. If you want me to like lose a lot of followers, have me talk about Lord of the Rings for a while because I'm not a big Lord of the Rings fan. But in the Elric saga, you have the 2 swords, Stormbringer and Mournblade, and their black swords covered in these red runes. And actually, it's like my tattoo on my arm are the swords. You can really see it, but kind of hard to show on camera. But
yeah.
The runes in the book are described like no one really knows what they mean. They just know that anybody that looks at them knows one thing, and that's to be afraid of them. They're not sure why they're afraid of them. They just know to be afraid. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of use that attitude that like you just know there's something to say telling you should be afraid. I'm not going to tell you to be afraid, but something that's saying that's what how you probably may want to act about it.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
So how would you, aside from just saying to your players, you should feel X or you should be, react this way?
Appropriate, yeah.
What do you tell them? Like, what kind of tricks do you have to get emotions out of the players without telling them specifically how they should feel?
I know my players really well. I know their characters really well, and I know how to get them to have reactions. And they also know how to kind of get reactions out of me in terms of like my players do surprise me. That's actually the one thing I like when they surprise me. We've had our entire campaign was like the first campaign was actually I had to cut a session short because like I didn't know the hell to do. Like I was so taken aback by a decision because I didn't expect it. And so as far as trying to get emotion from them, I know it makes them panic. Panic's actually the one thing I know how to incite them very quickly. Because I'm a better Dungeons & Dragons player than them. Like I hate to say that. Like I know how to like do all the tricks of the trade. Like I play a wizard largely in our games, and whenever I play, or a druid in the other games. And the reason why is because I play very technical characters. I don't do a lot like they're like, we don't have fireball. I'm like, no. Like they couldn't believe I didn't have any offensive cantrips at first level, and I was like, no, I don't. I have one offensive first level spell. That's Ice Knife, and that's it. Mm-hmm. And I already used it, so deal with it, guys. And like it kind of irked at that, and I'm like, no, but like you put me in a situation, I'll solve it. Like I'll figure it out. Mm-hmm. You guys are you're a freaking paladin. You know how to fight this thing. You figure it out. Like that's not my job. So yeah, I don't know. So other stuff like to incite. I don't know. I've gotten them to like really like taken aback and have like I get them attached to characters and then kind of usurp those characters. The big thing in the second campaign was that they're finding out that their decisions in the previous campaign made their previous characters at times villains, and so or their own characters become villains too. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so I think 3 of the major villains in this current campaign are actually PCs in the previous campaign.
Oh, okay. So
getting power hungry comes back to bite you.
So you figured out you've learned your characters enough to be able to manipulate them. Mm-hmm. Essentially manipulate them emotionally with your NPCs to get these reactions. Last question I want to ask you. I've been springing this on everyone because it's a fun question for me, but I want to know, what is your biggest struggle as a game master?
Yeah, I saw that one, and I was actually trying to think about that. And right now, I really don't have a lot of struggles. It's not time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not getting people to come to the game. It's not organization. It's not any of those. But that's only probably been in the last 5 years.
Okay.
And it took me a very, very long time to refine that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't feel I have anything I can really call a struggle right now.
Okay. Yeah.
I feel very flowing about it. But in the past, the struggles were largely organization, largely taking notes is a big problem for me. One of my learning disabilities is I have severe dysgraphia, so like physically writing for me is extremely painful and extremely hard for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so but I have a really good player. Actually, it's so funny because the player that does this, he's actually a special ed teacher, and he's the note taker for the party, and he takes exhaustive notes. He's got like 3 journals now for this current campaign.
Oh, wow.
And he's easy to help me reference and get back on notes and everything like that. So I think it's a matter of the struggle was initially trying to figure out roles for everybody besides me to be the keeper of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, is like that's why the game is so strong, because it's our game.
Yeah.
And I think once you can make it our game, it is very good. And I get asked a lot, is like, what's your favorite like campaign setting? What's your favorite like setting? What's your favorite villains? Also, and I'm like, it's mine. It's the ones I play because those mean the most to me. I think Critical Role's great. Mm-hmm. I like the characters, but is it the best one? In my opinion, no, because mine is my best one because it's in proximity to me.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But I wouldn't expect you to tell me, oh, hey, Bultena, your game's the best. No, I don't expect you to say that.
No, my game's the best.
You never played my game. You never seen mine.
But I like that statement. The idea of and you just kind of just got me thinking about that of kind of assigning, or even if you just have players who take on the role of note taking, and you could even split that down even further. And now I'm just on this tangent of like, oh, I could have an NPC guy. One of my players could keep notes about the NPCs. One could keep notes about the locations, because my players like having that information, and it's exhausting to try and take those kind of notes. So that's an interesting idea of kind of delegating responsibility and making it more of a team effort.
I have my home game has 8 players in it.
Wow.
And I can manage it pretty well. And I last time, well, actually, when the team came to town, she came over for my birthday game, and her and Heath played in my game, so I had 10 players. And that was actually the one thing she was surprised at, was that like how well I can manage 10 players. And my attitude towards that was like, well, I manage a classroom of 24 freshmen. I can do this. Like, you guys are adults. Like, you guys know how to handle yourself and everything. So this is pretty easy. You know the rules. They're still learning the rules. You know the rules. And so, yeah, it was good. It was cool. I let everybody kind of get a moment to shine. I let everybody kind of like have. It isn't just a matter of like them doing something. It's also kind of them. Even the delegation isn't just me delegating; it's them delegating to each other,
right?
Too.
Yeah.
And that teamwork's amazing. I get people. I've had a few guest players come in, and they're always shocked at how smooth my crew is. I don't know if you know Benjamin Huffman from Sterling Vermin. He did like the Pugilist class. He's one of the biggest sellers on DM's Guild ever. And he came
Pugilist class.
The Pugilist class is amazing. It's better than Monk. It's a better version of the Monk.
Mm-hmm.
He came over to play with us, and his comment afterwards, he's like, "Holy shit! I can't believe like how smooth everyone worked. They weren't working against each other. They knew what was up. They all knew they knew their cues. There was no point where they had like down kind of time, like and everything. They were all on top of it, and they laughed and they had fun." And they didn't feel like, I'm not like the D&D masters up there going, you do this now. I'm taskmastering you to do all this.
Yeah.
He's like, they wanted to do it. And so that was a really good piece of feedback I felt. You don't really notice it until, that's why I like bringing outsiders in, because they can give me good feedback and tell me what we're doing well and what maybe we need to work on still too.
Yeah. Because then they're kind of not in the, you can't see the forest from the trees kind of thing.
Exactly it.
That's a really interesting, and I would say that's an interesting tip too for people who've been running games for a long time, is bring in a guest here and there, see how it goes. I like that. Interesting ideas. I have a game coming up Friday that I'm going to try to see how the guys react, because that's another one.
Okay, had another comment real quick too. Is
Yeah.
I think my question about struggles, and I think actually one struggle I had as a dungeon master for a very long time was, this is gonna sound weird, but diversifying my games. That my players, I have about out of my 8 players, three are women. Um, one is African American, one's Native American, and it a lot of that was, I'm looking back at that, and I think a lot of it was that people, like, I mean, if you look at the history of D&D, I mean, it was created by white people in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know, and that's what's in Wisconsin. I hate to break it to people that, like, in the 70s, that's what was happening there. And so it took a while for that penetration, and I like that you have to be inclusive. You have to be culturally inclusive in the game, but also with people too, and understand their own issues and stuff like that too. And I think I've really come to like the work at the UC. I work with such a diverse population where 60% of our student body is Hispanic, and so that diversity working there has really helped me understand more. And my students have asked me about those kind of issues too, and I was like, yeah, there's been problems with it in the past. Let's talk about how we can address those things too and make it better. And I think that it's still kind of a struggle at times, but I've definitely kind of it's something I think it's, I don't know if I necessarily struggle with it still as much, but I definitely make myself aware that if there's a problem or not.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense from a player perspective, like in the party, but also I imagine you've kind of taken that to heart in your world building, I might assume.
Yeah, my world building is we haven't. I was actually talking about this with one of my friends online. Was one of the terrain I actually bought a lot of. I bought from a guy that specializes in like reconstruction of biblical scenes, and so I actually have all the buildings for a city, and it's all Middle Eastern.
Oh,
like Jesus time building styles.
mm-hmm.
And so that's how I actually was. I did that because I was building a city that was kind of Mediterranean, southern of this like more Germanic, more Estonian, more folklore oriented area, and I wanted to kind of craft that kind of an area and that kind of and put that kind of not that culture, but that kind of those kind of architectural elements. And I remember my friend saw it, and she's Middle Eastern, and she was, holy shit, like I've never seen someone do a board like this. It's really cool. And I like that kind of element of it, of trying to like really include, because I hate to break to you guys, but there's like, dude, cultures in the world are cool and neat, and they do some of the coolest stuff, and like you are cool not to look at it and like draw influence from it, like not that they steal, but like pull it and get some ideas for it, from there too. So my favorite idea is my friend wanted to play. He's like, I want to play a bard, but like I don't want to do like this guy on this page. I don't want to look like this. And I was like, well, what do you want? He's like, I keep on thinking like kind of this Middle Eastern style character. And I was like, dude, Arabian Nights is a bard's tale. That is like one of the greatest ones of all time. Why don't we draw on that for influence for your character? And we did. We drew on influence for his character, and he came up with like this amazingly cool, really different type of bard that told stories like that. And kind of all these kind of different kind of fantasy elements, and brought stories from afar that were different than the land he was in, and it really added to the flavor of the world. That like we could think of what's that place like, and then my players have eventually visited that part of the world.
Yeah,
and it fleshed out for me.
That is a really interesting point. Like the amount of inspiration you can pull from just the real world and the history. I hadn't thought about that before. I'm just like, oh. Yeah, there's
fantasy. Matt Colville has a great video about this about Fantasyland, which is basically British Germanic kind of fantasy.
Yeah,
and it's white, it's white Eurocentric fantasy, but there's so much more cool stuff out there. And there's stuff in the past that's been problematic. One of my students did some research and a report on Swordfall RPG, which is really cool. That punk cyber kind of like fantasy thing, and that was just I saw that, and I was like. I was telling her, I was like, you might want to go look at this. And she went and looked at it, and she was like blown away. And my student's African American, and she was like, this is really cool. I love the art in it. I love it. I was like, yeah, dude, look at this guy. This guy has got like a cybernetic arm, and he has like a leopard with him that has cybernetic enhancements, and he's got this laser sword. I'm like, dude, why wouldn't you want to be that? Like,
yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, so yeah, try to bring other stuff. Yeah.
I like that idea. That's a really good note, just in general. So thanks for bringing that up. It's, all honesty, sometimes it's as a white guy, it's kind of difficult to think about like what are these other cultures. It's just something I was raised in a certain way,
Yeah.
and though I may want to think about things, I am one of the guys who I am a Lord of the Rings fan, and I look at fantasy as that. But fantasy can also be everything else, and it can
So much of
be,
it out there.
draw
And
from a real world.
it's so the stuff that you weren't raised with
Mm-hmm.
is like it has even a bigger fantastic edge to it because
Yeah.
it's so new to you. It's still new to you.
Yeah.
Like dragons, elves, dwarves. Okay, yeah, we've
That's
been around the
whatever.
block, guys. But like, if you go and look at like Japanese vampires, they're very different. That was a big thing in Vampire when they put out the book Kindred of the East. It brought in a whole different element of like mythology around vampires that were. I mean, they didn't drink blood; they drank chi.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, what does that mean? Like, oh my god, that's scary. They're not actually puncturing your neck, but they can like suck your dreams out of your head. That's crazy. Like, what does that mean to me? And like
Yeah.
it's so I love that stuff. Yeah.
That gives me so many ideas of places I got to look into, or looking into the history of the world as it is, to fill in, to borrow for my own world. Last thing, John, where can people find you online, and what can they expect to see from you?
Okay, so I'm online at you can find me anywhere on any social media platform at onlyplaywizards, one word. Onlyplaywizards.com is my blog as well, but if you Google my name or onlyplaywizards, you'll find me. I also run Cauldron and Tower. Largely, we're found at Cauldron, the letter N, Tower, one word, on social media. And you can also find our web store at cauldronandtower.bigcartel.com. But I believe you put my link tree.
Yeah.
Things which are super handy. Link tree, guys, link tree. I'm telling you, it makes your life so much easier.
Yeah, it's nice.
Like,
it's nice.
I see people trying to post links on like Instagram stories. And they're like, I mean, if you posted like the link to this video in your Instagram, or not Instagram, your Instagram post, it'd be like, what's the point, dude? Like, no one's gonna put that in.
Yeah. I actually switched. I have my website, and I built a link tree on my website, so
That's
I don't have to pay Linktree.
But you also see on my site, you'll see me painting a lot of miniatures. I love painting miniatures, and I love showing them off. And I also collect vinyl records, and I will talk about music like nonstop. That's actually Masucci and I talked about The Sword the other day, which were one of my favorite bands. After I posted the Sword thing, so him and I kind of chat that up. And I love talking about music and art and whatever too. So always hit me up or whatever's good.
Yeah, so make sure you guys go look up John online, find all his stuff. Keep an eye out on for Cauldron and Tower. Eventually, you guys will come back into full production.
I'm hoping summer. I'm waiting for my friend one of my friends to get done teaching for the semester, and then we should be able to collaborate more. He's got anyone that's teaching right now is just busier than they've ever been in their lives. It's very different, very dramatic, and so we're adapting. And I don't like to burden people that if they got, it's my own little kind of fun thing as far as I'm concerned. I'm not like living and dying by Cauldron Tower money.
Mm-hmm.
If I was, I'd be dying. But it's a hobby and it's fun, and I love seeing people wear it. I love seeing people hang out with it. I love seeing people run it. I love hearing feedback on it, what you like, what you hated. Anything's good, man. So
yeah, so be sure to check it out. Tomorrow we have a really great guest. We have Kelsey Dion from the Arcane Library. She's coming on for the second interview I've got with her. I actually talked to her last year at GaryCon, which was interesting, trying to film an interview with a selfie stick. But so make sure you guys tune into that tomorrow. John, thanks once again for coming on the show. I appreciate it, and we will catch the rest of you guys tomorrow.